And welcome everyone to this second session on HR Masterclass. Today's session is going to be on designing a learning framework. And for that, we have with us Ms. Lata Nambisan, who is the managing partner at Savitor Business Consulting LLP. Savitor Business Consulting LLP focuses on individual and organizational change and transformation. Some of their assignments includes executive coaching, competency mapping, and competency-based learning programs, full cycle leadership development programs, organization redesign, sales organization effectiveness, the design of incentive plans, organization culture, performance management systems built on the concept of OKR, employer branding, employee engagement, and HR team mentoring. Their their clients are companies in the IT service, product development, ITES, media, and financial service sectors. Prior to Savitor, she was the President, People and Culture of Servian Global Solutions. On behalf of TiE Chennai and everyone present here, I would like to welcome you, ma'am, and request you to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Great pleasure to be back here. Welcome back to all of you who are rejoining from the last session. Warm welcome to all of you who are joining for the first time. I was just telling Priya that I totally enjoyed the session last time. Thank you for all the feedback. Based on the feedback, we made some changes, so I've tried to give more time for questions and more time for discussions. So looking forward to the next 1 hour. Now, the first session was on attracting employees, acquiring talent. This is really on designing a learning framework. So just before I get into the session, I consult widely with a range of organizations, and there are some stories with regard to learning and development that keep coming up. So I'm going to narrate a few stories to you before I get into the presentation. And what I would like you to do is just look at, do any of these instances resonate with you? Do you see this happening in your organization? So I'd like to hear, like you to reflect on that. So the first situation that I have to talk to you about is about a situation where the CEO of a company was talking to me about performance and results, and he said, I send my employees to so many training programs. When I see training programs, I think who can I send for this, and I keep nominating them, but honestly, I see so little impact on the ground. They go for the training and come back, and then it's back to work, back to business as usual. They get caught up in whatever is happening. So how do I ensure that my learning and development gives results? Some of you may find an echo with this story. The second story is, and I know that some of you are learning and development managers, are HR managers. So the second story is to do with an L&D manager who kept telling me that, if I don't do training, the CEO and the line managers keep asking me, why are you not doing training? And when I do training, invariably the attendance is about 40%. So what should I do? How do I make this happen? And when you say attendance is 40%, the trainers themselves get very demotivated. So how do I ensure that attendance is good? So that was the second situation. A third situation. So the first one was the CEO, the second one is the L&D manager. The third one was a very interesting one. The third one said that, I employed a consultant who came and told me that you need to send your people for a really high-profile leadership development program. So they designed a program which was so good, and I went very carefully through my list of leaders and nominated a few people, because this consultant said that they could take only 10 people. So I nominated 10 people. 1 year down the line, 7 of those people had left, and a whole lot of the people who I did not nominate for the program were so upset that they also left. So that's the third story, that if I make it very selective,
I spend money, I invest in a program, but finally it ends up in the totally opposite effect. I have people resigning. So that was the next story. The next one is about a company which said that we used to have a training calendar running till March 2020. You know, suddenly the whole world has gone to work from home. I'm not able to get my employees in for training, and after that, my entire training calendar has been frozen. Is that the right way to do it? Was the question that she had. The next one was really, how do I make my training more engaged? People seem to be very disengaged in training. So what do I do with that? They seem to be bored. How can I make it interesting? And I think some of you have also raised this question. And finally, this is really something which I was greatly amused by. There was a young employee in an organization, and I asked this employee, so what do you do in this company? What is your role? And he said, I attend training programs. I said, really, is that a role? So he says, no, what happens is everybody else is too busy. So, and my manager has to nominate someone for this program because otherwise HR will be jumping on them. Why are you not nominating anyone? So invariably I get sent. So almost every other day I'm sitting in a training program. So these are some instances of real challenges that companies face when they look at learning and development. Okay, so from there, I built the program. So what we're going to discuss in the next half an hour really, and then we'll throw it open for discussion, is what should you look at before you design a training framework, a learning framework? What should you look at? What are some of the aspects you need to keep in mind? What are some of the design pillars that from a best practice point of view are great to look at? What is a good learning framework? How do you look at technical skills, domain knowledge, culture sessions? How do you build culture? And these are many of the questions that many of you also raised. Managerial and leadership competencies. How do you use blended learning? And of course, like last time, we will discuss how do you do things remote. And we'll summarize with some mantras for success before we open up for questions. So as we go along the presentation, if you have any questions, do send them into Saurav or to Priya, or keep them with you and we'll give you time to ask. Okay, I'm getting into the subject of the presentation. So before you decide, what do you look at really? I think the first point, and I keep saying this, even in recruitment, I kept saying, look at what is your sustainable competitive advantage, what is your branding, and then decide. Here, what you look at is, what are the outcomes that you want? What does it mean to build organization capability? So in terms of technical skills, domain knowledge, culture, managerial and leadership, what really are you looking at in terms of outcomes? The second is to look at individual development and career progression for employees. What do you want your learning program to deliver? Because otherwise what happens is you end up developing a whole lot of employees who then are waiting to employ all those skills, those new capabilities that they've developed, and they find that there are no opportunities. So therefore, very important to start with what are the outcomes that I'm looking at when I design my learning framework. Some design principles that I have found extremely useful. The first is keep it simple. You know, the more complex and complicated you make your learning framework, the more the chances that it will not succeed. So ensure that you keep it really, really simple, and that will ensure that your people are able to implement it, that people are happy with the results. So keep it very simple. The next one is keep it very focused. I have seen organizations where it's really flavor of the month. So they suddenly hear there is a design thinking workshop here. Let's send 2 people for that. Then they hear that, there is a program on artificial intelligence. Let me send some people there. Or machine learning. Let me send some people there. What happens is people go for these programs, learn a whole lot of stuff, get excited by it, come back and business as usual. So ensure where you're going to spend your time. If you're sending someone for an artificial intelligence program, look at what is the application of it in-house. Always ensure that when someone goes for a training, they have a chance to apply it in your company. Otherwise, the individual will get frustrated perhaps, and more importantly, you will also be spending a lot of money which is not justified. The third pillar that I found very useful when I design a learning framework is to ensure it is sustainable. Now, there are many organizations that start off with a big bang. They announce one massive leadership development program, and then they struggle with implementing it. So slowly it fizzles out, and then people say that they keep starting these initiatives, but nothing really changes, nothing really happens. So sustainability becomes very important. I always use that as a test for the framework. The next one is to leverage opportunities. You don't have to create everything new. There is a whole lot of stuff, and especially in today's world, you have Coursera, you have Udemy, you have a whole lot of freeware training programs. See what you can leverage from there. You don't have to create everything on your own. So that's the fourth pillar that I have found useful. And the fifth pillar is shared responsibility. So how do you ensure that employees take ownership for learning? Because otherwise what happens is the situation that I told you, where attendance is very low because somebody is pushing training. Training should never be a push approach. It should be a pull approach. People should ask for it. Managers, employees should ask for it, and that's when it succeeds most. The moment you say that this is top driven, it becomes one more tick that I have to go through. This is painful training program that I have to go for. That's the way people will talk. So ensure that you share responsibility, look at what are people's aspirations, and then build it. Okay, so therefore, if these are the pillars on which you build, what does a comprehensive organizational learning framework comprise? Typically, it comprises 4 parts. One is technical skills and career ladder. What are we talking about here? We're talking of the real hardcore skills that are required to do the job. So it could be programming, it could be testing, it could be any of that in IT. In manufacturing, it could be rigging, it could be welding, it could be machining, it could be any of those skills. So you look at different skills and put a technical skill and link it to a career ladder. So that is one part of it. There is a domain knowledge part. So what is a domain knowledge? So for example, if you're in the steel industry, domain knowledge is to do with the steel industry. How does the industry develop? So there is a need for that. Now, the audience for different modules. So for example, the technical skills will largely be focused at the operational level. The domain, there will be some technical skills at the leadership level and all of that, but that is more from a technical appreciation point of view and not so much from a hands-on point of view. From a domain knowledge point of view, it is the reverse. At the lowest level, it is just an appreciation of the domain, just for them to get a sense of the big picture of the industry to which they're contributing. But at a more senior level, it is deep dive into what are the market trends, what are competitors doing, what is happening in this industry. So all of that is what domain knowledge comprises. Values and culture, extremely important. It is something that every single employee should go through, so it goes across the organization. And behavioral competencies, you have different levels. Typically, organizations do 3 levels, which is frontline, managerial, and leadership. So if you have these 4 elements, your framework for organizational learning is complete, really. What we will do is spend a little time on each of these elements so that you get an idea of how you can structure and shape this in your framework. Now, if you're looking at technical skills, first of all, ask yourself, what is the level of differentiation? So I've heard many of my clients say that customers love us because we are specialists. Now, if that is the case in your organization, that customers come to you because you are the guys who really know your technical skills, then you have to invest in technical training. It's a great idea to create a technical skills ladder. So So there what happens is, I've given you an example on that slide. So you have career levels and you have skill levels. So you link different skill levels to career progression, to compensation increases, all of that. And that's really a motivator then for people to acquire higher skills as they go. It also ensures that it keeps your people engaged and retains them in your organization. I've given you some examples of how you can do it. Typically, the way you operationalize it is to identify module champions who will then create a curriculum. And I'm a great proponent of bit by bit training. You cannot give a whole thing to employees in a chunk. Today, especially with, and the saying is that your span of attention is mostly about 7 minutes before you would need to change the slide or do something which is very different. Now, especially in the next generation of millennials, you've got to ensure that it is bit by bit, that they see something, they get a chance to apply it, and then you do it. Now, given our remote situation, this is a great way to implement training. So you have short videos that you develop, that you put out there, and then of course there is assessment and evaluation, and then the certification. So this is one way that you do technical skills, and this is one key element of your learning framework. Okay. The next element that we're talking about is domain knowledge. Now here it is different elements. So at the lowest level, I said that it is just an appreciation. But as you go up, you must ensure that your key people, whether they are sales leaders, technical architects, or any of them, they should be part of industry forums. And today, there are as many industry forums as you want where people can share knowledge, gain knowledge. They should attend webinars, they should network. And it's good to organize once a month knowledge sharing sessions when some new element is put up for discussion. People do research, come back, and many organizations now do something which is called a flipped classroom. It's a new concept in learning. So what people do is they send out all the material. So if I were to do a flipped classroom on this, what I would actually do is to send this presentation out to all of you and tell you, please go through the presentation. In the meeting, when we meet, when we all join together, we will only discuss questions and use case, things that you have done in this area in your company. So that's a flipped classroom. So that's a great way to do domain knowledge so that it doesn't get boring in a lecture. The next one is values and culture. Very important. Especially as you scale, at the startup time, it's easier done because people are still passionate, energized, energetic. But as you scale, it is so important to have those sessions to identify your values. So it starts with that really. As a promoter or as a leadership team member, what are the values that your organization holds dear? How do you articulate this? How do you identify culture champions across the company? How do you create a very simple 2-hour replicable workshop? Replicable in the sense that you can run it again and again every time new employees join the company. And this workshop should clarify expectations on core behaviors. It helps, the last session we were speaking of psychological contracting. This is one more step in psychological contracting. And a great way to honor the culture champions is to have them run those sessions. So this is another element of the learning framework that you should really have. Ensure that you educate people on values and culture, because that is what will help you, that's the cement that holds your bricks together. Okay, and now we're getting into another favorite area, which is actually all of these are favorite areas, so difficult to choose, but this is on leadership and managerial competencies. Now, the best way to build a scalable and repetitive model on leadership and management development is to identify critical competencies for the leadership level and the managerial level. The best way to develop, and this is based on a research project done by the Center for Learning. in Singapore. So they have done a research project which today is worldwide accepted as a great one for learning. And they have said that the best way leaders learn is through three things. And you would have seen this in your career if you actually relate it to instances where you have learned in your career. One is assessment. You must have a chance to look at where do you stand vis-a-vis what is expected from you. So assessment is important there. You do need support in development. So assessment and feedback. Somebody should be able to give you feedback in terms of where you stand on the competencies. Support is another. And the third is challenge. So if you are a manager and you're trying to develop somebody in your organization, the first is you must give the person feedback. The second is you must support the person in their development. And the third is that you must provide a challenging environment. So for example, I'm saying that this person is really very good, but the only problem is that this person will not take risks. So first, I give him feedback on that. Then I throw him in a challenging situation which requires him to take risk. But I don't leave him alone. I support him when he develops that. So that's a great way to develop. And if you were to look at it as a model, you start with what are the competencies targeted for development. So you have a whole list of critical competencies. You look at what does the role require, what does the individual require. You merge the two and identify which are the 2 or 3 competencies targeted for development. You look at what outcomes do we expect at the end of the learning. Okay. And then you look at what has helped me back from realizing my potential, and then actions that will help develop the competencies. So you just have a simple format, a simple form that has these 4 points, and you ask people to write this down, and then you have periodic reviews. Now, one question that people often ask me is, should we do development along with performance management? Personally, I always feel that it is a good idea to differentiate and separate the two. You have a performance cycle, which is typically, for example, April to March, you have a performance cycle in which you're only looking at what outcomes are expected from this person. And then you have a development cycle, which is perhaps September to August, which looks at what competencies should I develop and all that. Why is this so? Because in a performance evaluation, your employee will be very, very defensive. And for development, you want the person to be very open to inputs and learning. So therefore, it makes sense to separate the two, separate the performance cycle from the development cycle. So how do you create learning opportunities for people? Now, the best way to do that is do blended learning. It does not make sense to do only classroom learning. One, the cost is very high, and two, the impact is very low. So, you know, there is that very famous model which looks at classroom sessions versus projects versus coaching and mentoring. And they say people learn least in classroom sessions. They learn most through on-the-job assignments. And so therefore, how do you use all of that? You should actually make a whole basket of opportunities available to your leaders and tell them you choose based on whatever works for you, because different people learn in different ways. So you can look at online learning, you can look at reading, guest lectures, webinars. You can ask somebody to write a white paper, cross-functional projects, working with an internal coach or mentor. So you pair up people with different mentors, ask them to work with them. Journaling, which is really about writing down what did I learn, what did I do differently today. Shadowing, so for example, you're trying to develop a management trainee in sales. You ask the management trainee to shadow your best salesperson. And as the person shadows that your salesperson for a week, they automatically imbibe some of those deep smarts. So shadowing is a great one. Observation. So you want somebody to pick up customer handling skills. You get them to sit in on a meeting that you're having with your customer so that they just observe how you are handling it and so on. These are all great ways to learn. They require zero investment, but in terms of return on investment, they are tremendous. So I would really encourage each of you to really look creatively at what are all the different ways that people can learn in my organization and make it available. One, people get excited by it. It's not the same boring classroom lectures. And two, you're putting ownership for this in the employee's hands. So that's very quickly a framework on learning. So we spoke about, to summarize very quickly, we spoke about, let me take you back very quickly. We spoke about the pillars. We spoke about keeping it simple, keeping it very focused on why you are doing what you're doing, making it sustainable, leveraging opportunities and shared responsibility. We spoke of the framework comprising technical skills and career ladder. We looked at domain knowledge. We looked at values and culture, and we looked at behavioral competency. So we said, if you have these 4 elements in your learning framework, you really have a very, very comprehensive learning framework. And then, of course, we looked at each of these elements and came to one method of making learning very scalable, say using blended learning. Finally, before we get into the questions, I want to look at doing things remote. So this is something that many of you had also asked. Should learning really stop when we are all working remote? Actually, I was just sharing with Priya before the session that I actually feel that I'm far busier now than I was even before the lockdown and before we all started working remote. Most organizations are using this time to really help their people learn new skills, share what they're doing, share learning, all of that. So there seems to be a lot more of online learning that is possible. Short sessions, don't plan for a whole day. Plan short sessions, not more than 2 to 3 hours perhaps each module, but plan those and put a calendar in place, because this is a great way to do it. You have enough number of platforms. You have Zoom, GoToMeeting, all of those. Every single one of those, Cisco, WebEx, all of them are extremely useful, very user friendly, and by the day they're becoming better and better. So I would really urge you not to allow this current situation to stop you from developing your people, from investing in development, from spending time in developing your people, because there will come a time when this will pass and you will really reap the benefits of all the learning that you're doing here. I've heard many people say that this is also a great time and they have personally learned. So I'd like each of you to ask yourself, what have you learned in the last 2.5 months? How have you developed yourself? What are the new skills that you've developed? And you will see that automatically you have developed new skills. You have become a lot more creative in managing your work. You have become a lot more multi-dimensional in managing your home, your work, all of that together. So there is a lot of positivity that is happening, and you should really look at it from that point of view. So do let things continue. Don't bring things to a stop. Okay. Finally, before we get into question hour, some mantras for success. Again, I'm going back to it because this is really key to designing a good learning framework. Keeping it simple, keeping it focused, ensuring it is sustainable, leveraging all opportunities that you have, all the blended learning opportunities that you have for learning, making it creative, making it fun, making it exciting. That's what learning is about. Learning is not about getting bored in a classroom. Learning is about feeling excited about all the great stuff that you're picking up, how you are improving yourself, and feeling that at the end of the day, each day, that you're feeling fulfilled, that I've learned something new, done something very different. And finally, of course, don't take full ownership on you. Share the ownership, ensure that everyone is accountable. So I'm going to stop with this and throw the floor open for questions. So there is enough time for questions. Priya, would you like to has anyone reached out to you with questions?
Yeah, I just got one. It's from Jayashree Kasturi. Usually workshops involving team and client for problem identification and solution generation works well for fixing client team issues. Any thoughts on how to do it effectively in remote?
Okay. So Jayashree is on the call, right? So Jayashree, I'm assuming that earlier it was brainstorming sessions where everybody met, but now that we are not able to do that, how do we do that? There is nothing that prevents us from brainstorming even remote. There are enough brainstorming tools. The only thing that I would urge you on, Jayashree, is that insist that everybody turns their videos on. It is extremely difficult to have a meeting where people's videos are not on. So for all your meetings, especially where you're trying to resolve a problem, a customer problem, ensure that people keep their videos on. Do all the brainstorming, and there are a whole lot of brainstorming techniques. So for example, there is one which is reverse problem solving. So you say, what is the worst that can happen? And then, so you build from there and come. So if you actually look at, if you actually Google creative ways to solve problems, brainstorming techniques, there are a whole lot of brainstorming techniques, and some of them are very, very suited for online virtual meetings. I don't know, Jayashree, if this solves your question, if this answers your question, but otherwise, please do ask back.
Yeah, Lata, I think it kind of, especially when it's a client and team meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's another question. What does writing white papers mean?
Okay. Good question. Who's the person, Priya?
Jawahar.
Okay. Jawahar, which industry are you from?
Coir, ma'am. Coir.
Okay. So, for example, there are new discoveries there are new developments in the technique of coir making. Okay. So one of the ways that customers really respect somebody and see you as somebody who's doing something very innovative is when they see, papers being written or some new research material coming up in coir technology. So what you must do is invite your R&D team. I assume you have someone who's doing some research and development, or even your production head or your sales leaders, to really think about new techniques that you're doing, the way you are adding differentiation to this, and writing a paper. So writing a white paper is really about publishing a research paper. A white paper is really a research paper. And that's a great way to impress your customers on one side. On the other side, it's a great way for somebody to learn, because when I have to write a research paper, white paper is a research paper. If I have to write a research paper, I have to first learn that subject entirely. So I get rewarded because my paper gets published in, I'm sure you must be having journals on coir making, and there must be, the coir industry must be having journals.
Yeah,
if it gets published somewhere there, that is tremendous learning, accomplishment, and good for the company. That's what I meant by white paper.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, next question is also from Jayashree. Is it good idea to insist on market certification as a prerequisite for some roles like Oracle DBA certification or PMP for project management? What should be role of the company in enabling this?
So the first question I would ask Jayashree is, one, is this something that, because you know the certifications from customers like PMP or even Oracle, they are more expensive than your in-house certification programs. So first I would ask, is this something that will benefit my company? Do customers ask for PMP certification? Do they ask for Oracle certification? If they do, then you definitely must encourage. So there are different ways that you can do it. One is, if you can afford it, it will help to part fund it and say that you will get, this is subject to you passing the certification and getting the certification. So funding is one way. Second is support that you can give the person, so that in terms of leave to do the course, study time, mentoring support, access to course material, these are all various ways that you can support the person. But the first question to ask is this market certification relevant for my company? Is this something that will benefit my company before you get into it? Because finally, you know, all of it will require investment. And if it does, then absolutely. And you know, you can actually link certification to compensation increases, to skill, to career progression, to all of that. So I think those are all great ways to reward people for learning. It benefits the company, benefits the individual, and benefits your customer. So I would definitely agree, Jayashree.
Yeah, the next question is also from her. How to frame an induction training for new joinees in a startup company?
That's a great question, really, because you know, you can actually, it's a great advantage to be a startup when you are bringing in new employees, because one is, it is easier for you to get the promoter to speak to the person, all the leaders to meet the person personally. So you know, what is the objective of induction? The objective of induction is really, one, to socialize the new person. So when I say socialize, I'm really talking about helping that person to settle down, to understand the culture of this company, how do people interact. You know, there are simple things, Jayashree. For example, in this company, do people call each other sir and madam, or do I call by name? So in this company, is it okay for me to do this? Is it okay for me to say, for example, work flexible hours, or is it not? There are a whole lot of those questions. So that is one that needs to be answered. Second is from a culture point of view, getting the person inducted. Third is also from a process knowledge point of view. I was on a call just before this call, and the biggest challenge there was the attrition in the company is very high. So they're trying to solve for that. And one of the findings from the employee research that they did was to say that the employees said that, you know, the problem is that when they hired me, the vacancy had been open for so long that my manager said, no, you please jump into the job right away, put me on the job. And I'm still struggling with process and all of that. I finally gave up. I said, this is not something I can do, and I resigned. So attrition could also be because of this. So the first few days the first 90 days on the job is really the time which is so critical in cementing that relationship. So one is, I said, the socializing, the culture part, which is really about getting them to meet the new the entire leadership team, to hear the founder's vision in a startup. That is something which can really excite them. So it would be a good idea for you to put a 1-week program, starting with an address by the CEO or the founder, because that really inspires them. And then do a 30, 60, 90-day plan, which is really at the end of 30 days, the new hire has to come and present what did that person do in the first 30 days. So give them an assignment which speaks to their strengths, makes them feel successful. That is important. So your induction is really not a 1-day program. It's really a 90-day program, except that it is much more intense in the first week and keeps going on. At the end of 90 days, you'll find that that person is then so fully fully entrenched in your system. That person feels that they've been there 9 years instead of 90 days. So that's the kind of thing that you must aim for in your induction program. Sorry, that was such a long answer to a short question, but I hope it helped you. Thanks, Lata.
Yeah. So the next question is from Saranyan Krishnamurthy. When we need to list down required competencies for different people, okay, what are the process we need to follow?
That's an excellent question, really. So competency mapping is a very specialized skill sometimes, but to be honest, if you don't want to go that route, you can easily do it yourself. The best way to do that is to really look at you look at interviewing different people. So one is to interview your customer to find out. So look at who are the internal customers or external customers for this role to find out really what will help make this person successful. Then you ask that same question internally to role holders. You look at successful role holders and ask what has helped you become successful. You ask your CEO, and based on all of that, you will get about 10 or 15 qualities that each of them says. So for example, somebody may say, I need this person to be very, very results oriented and achievement driven. So that's a competency that you put down. So you identify competencies based on this to identify the top 10 or 12 competencies that really will help someone be successful in your company. That's at the simplest level how you can do it. You could also do it for each role, but ideally you should look at it at a leadership level. If I were to look at my top 5 successful leaders in this company, what are the behaviors that have distinguished them? So you may say that, this person is extremely customer focused. Great. So customer focused is one key competency that you will need to bring in. This person is very, very people driven. So, okay, people driven because, we are a very people intensive business. We are a retail organization or we are a manufacturing organization where there are a whole lot of people who report into this person. That is a second one. A third competency is that in this industry, there are so many concerns that keep coming up. We want this person to be very solution focused. So solution focused. So we want this person to come up not just with problems, but also with solutions. So that is extremely important. We want this person to be very, very execution focused. That is another competency. If you're looking at the leadership level, you may want to say that, we want this person to have a good strategic thinking to what they do. We want them to keep a long-term focus as well as a short-term focus in what they do. So then strategic thinking. So that is one way that you can build competencies. Another simple way that you can look at competencies is to just look at different competency frameworks that are there on the internet. Okay. So if you were to look at, I don't know which industry you belong to, but if you were to say, for example, if you are from the IT industry, I will actually look at I'll search for competencies for IT services companies, and you get a whole lot of them. And I will look at my specific requirement, my specific company, and look at which ones are most applicable to me. Those are easy ways that you can do a competency mapping exercise. Of course, you could also go to the Hayes organization, Boston Consulting, all the big 5 consulting firms also do competency mapping, but you could also do it for yourself, depending on how complex or complicated you make it. My advice, keep it very simple, because that's how people relate to it. Otherwise, what happens is, if you make it very complex, people love it. It's a wonderful manual. It looks very nice on your bookshelf. And when new employees come, you can talk about it. But that's all. People don't relate to it. Now, if you want people to relate to it, it should be simple enough for people to understand, use it in day-to-day work, and so on. So that's my advice in terms of competency mapping.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Next question is from Nikita Bandla. What does leverage opportunities mean? I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Nikita, thanks for the question. So I was saying that when you design your learning framework, you don't have to look all the time to create your own solutions. There are enough opportunities that you can use to bring in from outside. So, for example, I'm looking at all my sales leaders need negotiation skills. Now there are two ways to do it. One is to build your own program, which is a time-consuming, effort-intensive program way of doing it, but it may also be more effective in the long run. The other is to say, hey, I need to work on this fast. Now, how do I leverage opportunities that are available? So I go to Udemy, for example. There are online courses on negotiation skills that I can take up. Now, depending on my budget, I can look at Harvard University, and I must tell all of you this, that in this time when the world is working remote, a lot of the programs from Harvard, from Oxford, all have become hugely affordable. So these are certification programs, online programs. So it's a great opportunity, great time to leverage some of those if you would like to. But that's what I meant, Nikita, by leveraging opportunities. Look around you, see what is available around you, and use those. You don't have to reinvent everything. You don't have to create everything from scratch. It is possible for you to put together a perfectly good learning framework using what is already available. So that's what I meant by leveraging opportunities.
Yeah.
I actually put these mantras based on my personal experience, so I can quite understand if some of it doesn't, if the language is a little difficult to understand, because I just used it from my head. So feel free to question and to understand if you need to.
Next question is also from Jawahar Ravichi. For outside training, it is very difficult to pay for every employee. How do you make sure all the employees who need external training get trained with budget constraints in place?
Very, yeah, I can understand that question absolutely. So there are different ways that you could do that. One is through a train the trainer concept. So for example, if there is a program that if it's an external certification program like the one Jayashree was talking about, the market certification program, Jawahar, then there is nothing you can do but to go for it. But if a market certification is not called for, then what you can do is to get your best guy to go and attend it on the condition that they come back and train all the others in that. That is one way. So it has two benefits. One is, of course, the cost advantage. Two is that it's a good refresher for the people who attended the program because they're teaching somebody else. Three is, then the third advantage, which I'm just thinking as you're asking this, is that you can actually look at true to life examples. So you can, so when you do this internally with that, you can look at external examples as well as internal examples. So those are all some advantages of doing it. But that is one great way of ensuring that you get the best benefit of external training. So I keep saying this, if you're nominating people for external training, ensure that you nominate people to different external training programs so that you can leverage the best of all those programs. Only ensure that whoever goes for training has to come back and train several others in the company. May mandate that as a basic requirement of anyone going for external training. A lot of companies do a bond if you nominate for external training. To me, more than a financial bond, the bond should be in terms of commitment to come back and train others in this. I think if they do that, they've really given back whatever you spent on the program. So that is something that I would really recommend. And you also ensure that future generations of employees also get the benefit of that. Now, today, given the remote working, People are converting these learnings into online modules, which are then available in your learning framework. A lot of companies are investing in learning management systems. These are all expensive options. Depending on your budgets, you should definitely go in for that. They do have great benefits. But I'm saying that you can actually design a really good learning framework even on a shoestring budget. Your budget should not constrain you from achieving that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah. Next is from Kavita Kalai Selvi. Any thoughts on the behavioral skill training, especially when it's 100% remote? We miss ice-breaking sessions, eye contact, sensing the pulse and changing the gear, etc.
Yeah. Kavita, this is such a good question because I'm dealing with this every day. So one of the programs that I run is a virtual team management program, which is for, I run this at 3 levels. 1 is for the leadership team, 2 is for the managers, and 3 is at the operators level. Now, the biggest challenge is, see, at least at the leadership level, we have Zoom. I insist people switch on their videos, and that helps me to a large extent in looking at body language and all of that. Even in the next level, to some extent, it is available. But at an operator level, people are not on Zoom. They do not have laptops. They have computers, perhaps. Sometimes not even that. So how do you do training? So we are really experimenting with a whole lot of new ways that we can, through doing calls, through doing group activities on WhatsApp calls, things like that. So there is a whole lot of experimentation that is going on. But to me, it's always about looking at how can I make this happen? And not to say that because of these constraints, I can't do it. Yeah, is it more difficult? Of course, it is more difficult. But there are also advantages. So for example, if you're doing it online, if I'm sitting in a classroom, I have 20 people in the classroom, I'm not seeing their faces because there are different things that are distracting me. When I'm doing an online session, I have 20 faces on my screen because you have a grid view where I can see every single person's face, and the focus is really good because I'm looking at faces. I'm not looking anywhere else. I'm not distracted, and the participants are also not distracted. So these are great ways. Last time, if you remember, if you were there last time, we did the breakout sessions. All of those are great for team engagement. So today's online conveniences are so good. You really don't miss it too much. The only other advice I would give you is that, while earlier, so for example, some of the sessions that I really struggle with are the behavioral change ones, the leadership change ones. I've been doing a workshop for the CEO and his leadership team in a change and transformation project that they're going through. And it is extremely difficult because if you're face to face, some of those arguments, some of those discussions, some of those open feedback and all of that can happen so much better. But we found our way through it. We do these video sessions. We do it for 3 hours each session. And we do manage to, I think, do a pretty fair job of it. The other advantage is that people get a chance to go back home, think it over before the next session, come back better prepared for the next session. So all of those advantages are there. It's really about looking at what is positive and leveraging that to the extent possible. But yes, there are definitely challenges, and we've got to see how we work through that.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lata, because I can imagine, because I'm struggling even with IT folks with the online platforms, established ones. I can imagine when you're dealing with, people like at an operator level and all that.
Yes.
So,
Yes, Kavita.
yeah.
Really. Thank you for the question, Kavita.
Yeah. Next question is from Jawahar again. Apart from quiz test questions, how do we ensure a person is fully trained before we certify them, especially for training related to machine operations? How do you ensure the operator knows every operation and switches the machine?
Yeah, that's a great question, really. So, Jawahar, there is no short-circuiting this. assessment and evaluation is so very important, especially in this kind of an operation wherein you are risking life, you are risking things. If you don't do things well, it could result in a whole lot of issues. So for example, I did work with with several manufacturing industries in the Coimbatore belt quite a few years back. And one of the challenges that we spoke about was this: how do we really ensure that people are trained and certified? So training is one part. The assessment and evaluation is extremely important, and also important that you don't really pass a candidate unless you are sure that that person has fulfilled all the requirements. So having a very clear test template is so important in these skills. So it's as much about the test template as about the knowledge that you're giving the person.
So, ma'am, so should I, especially for machine operators, so for checking if they know how to operate the machine, so should I or one of the production managers stand in front of them and ask them to show, like, if they know each operation of the machine, if they can do it, things like that?
Yes, Jawahar. So, I'm going to go back several years. I worked in a public sector manufacturing organization. And I must tell you that some of the best testing methods that I've seen is in, so for example, I remember that we were doing a selection of crane operators. Now what we do is we have a committee which is there for this, and so they've all gone through the training, and then we are certifying them. And there is a technical person, there is a HR person, there is also someone from the production department. All of us, so it's a 3-member or a 4-member technical panel comprising of technical and HR who's evaluating the person. And there is a test template. So for example, is he able to brake properly? Is he able to take a turn sharply? Is he able to operate the load carrier properly? These are all questions that are there, and you give them an assessment based on that. Very important that someone responsible gets involved. Even if it is not you, you've got to nominate someone who will uphold those standards. So, they have to file reports, because these are important to ensure. So I would definitely say that you should test, and you should personally review it if you're not personally assessing.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, the next question is from Saranyan. We have layers like executive who execute work, team leaders who supervise execution, directors who's in the leadership level. I would like to have some example in terms of leadership competencies for different levels.
Okay. So, Saravanan, you said, right?
Saranyan.
Okay. Okay. So the way I would look at it is, at a leadership level, some of the competencies that you may look at is, so for example, strategic thinking is a competency that is most often seen only at a leadership level. I would look at people leadership as, so inspiring and motivating people as another competency. I would look at relationship building with customers as another competency. I would look at execution competence as another getting people to do things right, to implement all of that as another competency. So some of the competencies will be strategic thinking, conceptual clarity, team leadership, customer appreciation and customer sharing customer insight, building customer relationship, understanding the industry trends, all of that. At the next level, at the managerial level, you may say planning, organizing, and delegating. You may say task orientation. You may say being hands-on and execution skills. You may say, so some of the skills may be same, but the way you define it will be different. So for example, execution skills, you may say in both leadership and in managerial level, but at leadership level, you will say execution skills is about guiding people in execution, setting direction clearly, clarifying goals to people, managing performance very clearly. These are at a leadership level. At a managerial level, execution skills is more about planning, organizing, decision making, things like that. So that is at a managerial level. At the lowest level, it is really about very simple customer handling skills, teamwork, taking ownership, communicating, being diligent and being able to stretch where required, quality orientation. These are some of the competencies at the lowest level. So that is the way you differentiate competencies between. I would normally define competencies only at 3 levels, which is leadership, managerial, and operational or executive. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Next
we are
question.
almost out of time. Or you want one more question?
There are just 3 more questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you, this question is from Jayashree again. Can you define a effective framework for e-learning, especially at entry level?
For e-learning at entry level, okay. The truth is that today I think all learning is e-learning because life has come to that. But having said that, there are different ways, there are different online courses that are available in different areas. Jayashree, I would really recommend that at entry level, you start by defining the curriculum. Once you define the curriculum, you look at specific subjects and search for good online courses. You'll find a whole lot of them. Once you've identified those, then you get employees to register for them. Okay. So that's a great way to define online courses. Now, depending on if you are developing them yourselves, then there is another way to do it. You need to find a Moodle platform and there is a technical aspect to it and all of that. But today you can design courses on your learning management system, or you could also do external programs. It's all available today. It's not, and all programs are online today. Yeah, Priya?
Yeah. Next is Jawahar. He wants to ask you a question directly.
Sure.
Regarding orientation program, I just want to share my own experience in my first job. So, when I joined the company, they actually gave me 80 different procedures to read in the orientation program. I'm a kind of a guy who wants to hit the ground right away and do the procedures side by side, but that company said, no, you have to finish reading all the 80 procedures, take the test, and then, get into the job. And that was really boring for me to, for the first 3 months, I was just reading procedures after procedures and taking tests, that was kind of really boring. So I want to know, but they did have a point, because a lot of those procedures were very important for the job. And if I had not known those procedures, I wouldn't have done the job exactly as they wanted me to do. So my question is, how do we strike a balance here?
Yeah, that's a great question, because this is something that a lot of youngsters tell me that it's why does HR do this? It's so boring, really, to be sitting and reading manuals, and especially when you're fresh out of college and you're not wanting to spend your time reading manuals. But then it's also important to read those manuals. So what can you do to make it interesting? One is that you say that. So for example, if there is a batch of engineers who have joined, some 5 engineers, just assume that they've joined together. You say that each person reads a manual and makes a presentation to the others, and that you're going to rank them and score them based on that. It becomes interesting then, because there is an output that they have to do. It becomes very boring if I have to just read it and do the test, and then that's where people are tempted to skip some parts and all of that. And if see, very often the problem with reading these manuals is you're reading in a very mechanical way. If you understand the purpose for each of those chapters, it is easier to read. Today, of course, companies are using simulation and all of that to see how they can make these boring manuals interesting. So they have games, they use game-based learning and all of that. But a lot of industries can't afford to do that, don't have the luxury of time to do all that. So they insist on the manuals. Here to see how you can make it a little interesting. So for example, can you tell the person that instead of giving them 1 week and 10 manuals to read, can you give it in bits? Can you say that today you finish half a manual and then have a discussion with somebody else on it, so that there is it's very boring to be sitting and reading because you're just dying to get your hands dirty, to get to work, to all of that, and then to be told to read manuals and stuff. So I think you need to strike a balance. As part of orientation, you definitely want them to read those manuals, but see how you can make it a little more fun. Understand that these are millennials, these are kids whose attention span is not great. It's very boring to be going through. Put yourself in their shoes. I'm so glad you're doing that. But yes, you have to strike a balance, and you need both. So
but
you can
what
only say that
what was really boring for me was it was completely theoretical. And none of it was like, I couldn't see how those procedures are being applied in the factory, inside the manufacturing plant, or inside the accounting.
I was telling you about the flipped classroom. That is one way that you can bring the boredom out of it. So what do? I tell you, can you read this chapter? And then I'm going to get you to work with a manager and you can ask him questions in terms of how does this get applied. Or even flip it even more. You have the person work with the manager, see the context of its application, and then go back and read it. It becomes very interesting then, because they then see why this was done in a certain way and so on. So I like the fact that you're thinking about this. I think it's a great responsibility for all of us to see how we can make learning fun. Learning is not meant to be dreary. We do need to learn some dreary stuff, but it is always possible to make it more fun.
Okay, thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's about it. There's no more question in the chat.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you for some of the insight. Very interesting to hear your personal experiences. I absolutely enjoy doing these sessions. Thank you all for participating. Priya, Saurav, Kapil, thank you for all the arrangements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for your time, and see you next week for the third session.
Sure. See you, Priya.
Yeah.
Catch you
Thank
then.
you.
See you
Thank
all.
you.
Bye.
Bye.